Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'd like to talk about my October favorites in the areas of sustainability and environmental science. Let's get into it. So my first favorite is a startup company called Flash Forests. They have drones that they've programmed to fly over areas of vacancy and plant seeds for trees. So the way that this works is that they in a specific project that they're doing near Toronto, they are shooting native seed pods for trees into an area that had been previously desiccated by a fire. So by doing this, they are cutting down on resources that would be needed to physically go in and plant trees, like human labor or soil and shovels and things like that. They're cutting down on all of those needs and just using those drones to fly over and plant the native seeds. The reason why this is one of my favorites is because this is a quick and efficient way to fight against things like deforestation, the reduction of a bunch of trees that are being pulled down for things like palm oil or agriculture and things like that. This is helping to fight those deterioration that's happening with regards to trees. I like it because it is highly efficient and it requires minimal resources. And it's also helping to improve biodiversity in those areas. Once those seeds take off and we're getting bigger and bigger plants, all of that area can serve as habitat for things that otherwise wouldn't have a home. And by 2028, they hope to have planted over 1 billion trees in different parts of the world. Again, I'd like to give a big shout out to Flash Forest. I think that their objective is really noble and they're using the best technology and really smart ways and efficient ways to help fight against some of the environmental deterioration that's been happening throughout the years. My second favorite of October has to do with a law that is being enforced in New York City. This law is the ban of plastic bags being distributed to customers. There are a few exemptions to this law. However, I think that this really is a leap forward for New York. New York State is typically using about 23 billion plastic bags a year. So I think that if New York is able to reduce that number by any amount, really, I think that that really is a leap forward and an improvement. As we have seen, plastic bags don't always make it into the garbage receptacles. Sometimes you see them in gutters or stuck in trees or even in our waterways, which is just, it's not aesthetically pleasing, and it's also detrimental to species and wildlife that is living amongst our waste. So I really do appreciate and I look forward to this change that New York City has made, and that is why I've chosen it as one of my October favorites. My third favorite has to do with an offshore wind farm in the Netherlands. So the Borssel offshore wind farm has opened up their facilities for research, specifically having to do with oyster reefs. So in the off the coast of the Netherlands, they previously had a flourishing oyster reef population, but unfortunately due to overfishing and changing environment in that offshore ocean area, they have seen a decline in the oyster population in that area of the world. So what the Borssel wind farm is doing is that they have offshore wind energy turbines like in the waters. There are like offshore structures, and they've opened up that area for research to see what habitat is most suitable for oyster reefs. So they installed 8 different structures along the coast of the Netherlands where those wind farms are located, and they are testing different habitat options for the oyster reef restoration efforts. So by using this research showed the different types of habitats for those oysters and which would be most conducive to the oyster population vamping up. This is important because in this area, these researchers were looking to improve those numbers and start creating oyster reefs, like artificial oyster reefs. So the reason why this is one of my favorites in October is because it demonstrates the marriage between a human goal or a human activity and nature enhancement. So here is a perfect example of how humans, using energy generation, which is something that we need, we are able to incorporate different techniques and different research into creating this habitat enhancement. My fourth favorite for the month of October has to do with research that was conducted in Ohio State University by a graduate student named Mr. Chen. So Mr. Chen created a research project having to do with nutrient pollution uptake by native aquatic plants. So what he did was he created some artificial floating structures, and he placed into each one of them, he placed a few aquatic native plants. And what these plants do is that as the top of the plant grows out of the water, the bottom has all of the roots, the root system that starts to grow. And those roots uptake nutrients that are in the water. The reason why nutrients in water is an issue is because it can serve as an imbalance to the natural habitat. For example, in Florida, there are a lot of nutrients that that leach into the waterway systems that are around Lake Okeechobee. The reason why the nutrients get into the water is because of things like agriculture or fertilization of land, such as golf courses. So fertilizer is put onto the plants or the grass of golf courses, and when it rains, that the nutrients, the fertilizer, like leaches off of the area that's intended, and it ends up making its way into waterways. Nutrients such as fertilizers like nitrogen and phosphorus are bad for the regular ecosystem of the water because it imbalances the nutrients that are there. In Florida, for example, this leads to things like red tide, which can be, it's toxic in the air, it's toxic to the fish in the water, it's just a really bad situation. So Mr. Chen did his research on uptake of nutrients in Ohio using these plants that take out, with their root system, they take out some of these excess nutrients from the water. The reason why this is one of my favorites of the month is, again, it's showing the marriage between human technology and human goals, being considerate of the environment and of the natural habitat. So fertilization is a necessary part of agriculture. However, we can implement other systems such as these artificial floating structures that have these plants that absorb up those nutrients, which would otherwise be causing issues for the ecosystem in the water and also on land or in the atmosphere as a result of our actions. So my last favorite for the month of October has to do with research conducted at Texas A&M University. This research has to do with the byproducts that are produced as a result of chlorination for water treatment. So in regular water treatment, we are applying chlorine to that water to serve as a disinfectant. So that kills off bacteria and viruses that we wouldn't want to be drinking. So as a part of water treatment, they add chlorine to the water. Unfortunately, and there are treatment processes that happen after the chlorination to remove the chlorine from the water and make it suitable for drinking. However, after chlorination, we do experience byproducts as a result of that treatment process. That can be, it's an extra step in the water treatment process that is unfavorable and costly. The research in A&M University has to do with adding a compound of iron before the treatment of the chlorine in order to help reduce those byproducts that are introduced into the system. So this research has to do with adding ferrate, which is an iron compound, into the water before chlorination, and they found in the results that this actually does reduce the disinfection byproduct in the water post-chlorination. Again, this byproduct is something that can be harmful to humans, and it does add to an extra step in water treatment. It's also something that the EPA monitors regularly to make sure that the disinfection byproduct stays within the acceptable limits for human consumption. However, with this Ferrate addition in the beginning of that process, we are able to take a low-cost substance and add it into the water treatment process to negate consequences or byproducts that we would otherwise be experiencing later down the line. I think that this is a really excellent improvement and discovery. Iron is a common compound that we find even in the ground, in the dirt. So it's low cost, it's efficient, and it's reducing other kind of steps and elements in the treatment process that would have to be included after chlorination. So we're evading those extra steps. Okay, so those were some of my favorites for the month of October, having to do with environmental science or areas of environment and sustainability. If you have any additional favorites or any kind of things that you've learned about recently that are cause for hope, please feel free to share them down in the comments below. I do just want to give a quick disclaimer. In sharing my favorites for the month, I'm not trying to negate any kind of environmental concern that we need to be having for climate change and global warming and habitat deterioration as a result of human interference. I'm simply trying to highlight the work that others are doing, because there's people working every single day for hours at a time trying to improve our situation, and I think it is important and inspiring to look to those people and see what they're doing and feel hope and feel inspired to do something similar or to find a way that we can make a positive change as well.